Hello, everyone. My name is Jarosław Radzikowski. I'm the CEO of Nubino. And today I am joined by Lucy Deus, the SVP of Supply Network Products at TraceLink. Hi, Lucy. I think Lucy is having a bit of trouble with her microphone. So whilst waiting for Lucy to join us with the mic, maybe let me quickly explain that today's webinar is designed as a conversation, and we invited Lucy, who is working at TraceLink as a person who's responsible for the supply network products, as an expert, as an SME, so we can discuss on what's happening exactly right now with the supply chain orchestration using the agentic AI. So it's going to be, it's not going to be a lecture, it's going to be a conversation that we're going to have with Lucy. Hi, Lucy, I see you resolved your technical issues. I'm super happy to see that. So I did try to introduce you a little bit, but maybe you can say hi and a few words about yourself.
Sure. Hi, everyone. It's great to be joining you virtually. I'm excited to talk to you today about our external manufacturing collaboration, AI capabilities, and the whole subject matter. It's a topic that I'm really, really passionate about. My background, I've a co-founder of TraceLink. I've been with the company literally since day one, and kind of driving through this passion to get us to where we are today with enabling all these supply chain partner collaboration capabilities, and now being on this really amazing technology revolution where we get to sort of implement AI as part of our day-to-day capabilities. So it's a very exciting time for us all.
I'm super happy to have you, Lucy, and I know that in your busy schedule you found time to talk to me. So thank you again. And I already mentioned that we planned this as a conversation, not a lecture. But to everyone who attended, please just know that this session is recorded. So after we finish, you will receive some materials, so you'll be able to get back to this. We're also going to be organizing a little bit of workshop type of follow-ups for whoever is interested. So this is coming after the webinar. So before we jump in, there's a buzzword, AI, nowadays for everything, and today we wanted to focus on external manufacturing because it's becoming increasingly more complex. There's a lot of stress. We all hear faster, better, cheaper, and it's not just somebody in the company saying that, but it's literally the industry is going that way. The competition is getting better, faster, and in order to be competitive in the markets, you need to find ways to operationally improve. So Lucy, working closely with organizations in the industry, what do you think? What are the main pressures that the organizations are facing when planning, executing, and operating with the external manufacturing?
Yeah, I would frame the main pressures in external manufacturing really as a scale problem, and blended together with a significant coordination challenge. When you think about pharma companies, they rely more and more on the external manufacturing partners than they ever have. So they're leveraging their contract manufacturers, packagers, CDMOs, suppliers, logistics partners. But the operating model, as they've evolved and continue to grow their reliance on external manufacturing partners, their operating model has not kept up with that pace. And so too much of the work that they do still depends on spreadsheets, emails, portals, manual reconciliation, and occasionally you do see some integrations with companies, but they're often highly specialized or limited one-off integrations, or with a very few select CMO partners. And the result of this, because it's not unified, is the systems are fragmented, the data is fragmented, as well as the processes. And this creates a really significant operational impact. The teams are spending way too much time reconciling information when really they should be acting on the information. And it becomes very difficult for them to maintain a real-time view of their inventory, their orders, their status, the shipments, exceptions. At the same time, they have to make decisions in near real time. They have to be responsive as demand shifts, supply constraints, quality events, production issues, logistics delays. All of these things require that rapid coordination across the different organizations. And when the information is flowing manually, issue detection and the resolution, it really slows down significantly, and it becomes a real significant challenge for them.
Yeah, I mean, thank you, Lucy. I think there's a couple of there's so many questions in my mind now, but let's go through them as we speak in the webinar. Maybe let's start with a small poll, just to keep it more interactive with our audience. So the question is, and everyone should be seeing it in their screens. Where is your organization today in digitalizing external manufacturing? If you could maybe choose one response that is best for you and your organization, that would be great. And we have 4 options. It's mostly manual, email-based, as Lucy just mentioned, partially digital but fragmented. It happens a lot in many organizations. Integrated with selected partners, and end-to-end fully digitalized. And I see that this response is coming. Lucy, it looks like we've got probably the first 2 are more or less the same, although the partially digital but fragmented is the most popular, just ahead of mostly manual email-based. Are you surprised?
No, I'm not surprised. I can't see the poll results the way you can, but no, I'm not surprised.
Okay, so I mean, me neither, because when we're working, in Nubino, we help companies to work operationally and together, working together with TraceLink to help with the change. And looking at the response number 1, which is partially digital but fragmented, is actually something that I would be expecting. And then the second one is actually the same now in terms of the number of responses, mostly manual email-based. So this is exactly what you started with, and it's interesting because it's what leads us really nicely into the next topic of our conversation, which is what does it really mean to build a digital foundation? Why is it so critical at this point of time for organizations? What do you think?
Yes, so much on execution, we just talked about this, is happening outside of the enterprise because of the reliance on third-party partners and working with and across the third-party partners. And when you think about that, these supply chain ecosystems are becoming increasingly complex, and that requires that higher level of coordination. And we talked about, earlier, companies are now expected to respond faster to market demand. They have to improve their service levels. They have to reduce their costs. But at the same time, there's strict quality and compliance standards that they need to make sure that they are continuously honoring. And this requires a significant degree of control, of visibility, of ensuring that you have data that you can trust, that you're going to leverage in that decision-making process. And so when we think about how the conversation, it really starts to change. It's, not really anymore about how do we optimize our individual processes. It's really more about how do we build those operational foundations that are going to enable that coordination, that visibility, that intelligent decision-making that at scale. And the choices that companies make today are going to be especially important because they directly impact the future AI readiness and their ability to get onto the AI path at the point in time that they're ready. And this is important because agentic AI itself depends on that trusted, contextual, increasingly real-time data across your supply chain network. And if your data remains fragmented across systems and supply chain partners and buried in your emails and spreadsheets, you might achieve a little bit of isolated automation from your workflow, and you might improve some individual tasks, but companies are going to struggle to really scale their intelligent operations across the network. So those investments that companies are considering and that they're making today in their data quality, in their partner integration, in their process standardizations are really preparing that enterprise for the next generation of intelligent operations.
Right. Thank you. And actually, that's a very valid point and very important point that you mentioned, the operational foundation, the operational change, because it's not just the technology that will cut the trick. But having said that, I have another question to you. We started talking about the digital readiness. What does it really mean? What is it?
Yeah, so for me, digital readiness means having an integrated operational environment where your data can flow reliably across your systems, but also across the different supply chain partner organizations. It means that the processes are more standardized. It doesn't mean that everybody is doing everything exactly the same way, but you have enough consistency across the processes and the data that flows to feed those processes that you enable companies to operate the way they need to operate. And the teams at the end of the day need to ensure that they have trusted information that they can quickly act on. So this boils down to a few things like, okay, that's great. What does this mean in practice? And what are the things that I need to care about in practice? You need to know where your critical data is, and you need to bring it into your digital platform so that it can be accessed and used across the enterprise and with your supply chain partners. Also, you need to integrate your partner network, because in external manufacturing, much of that execution is sitting outside the four walls of the organization. And so that integration is really critical to tap into that data. Third, you need to ensure that the data itself is standardized. That's some of that standardization that's really important. It needs to be standardized. It needs to be contextualized. Contextualized means the system understands the data. You understand the data. You understand the relationships between the data. Like this purchase order relates to this production order, relates to this invoice, and so on. You need to trust that data. So that data readiness is not just about, hey, I'm going to digitize some documents, I'm going to move some files around. The data needs to be accurate, it needs to be timely, it needs to be consistently linked to those underlying business processes. And it doesn't matter whether it's your inventory or if it's production, if it's quality, if it's your orders, your shipments, your forecasts, all of that needs to be linked and understood. And then fourth, it means digitally orchestrating the end-to-end processes around that data. So across your planning, your manufacturing, your quality, logistics, even finance, through the shared workflows, through synchronized view of events, real-time signals, dependencies on things. And then lastly, governance is really important. Governance and your operating model readiness, because again, this is, as you talked about, this isn't just a technology integration exercise. It's really gets into your operating model. It has to be a sustainable way of operating across your internal teams, but also your external partners.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and thank you, Lucy. But we've been seeing that in Nubino that quite often the companies would focus really maybe only on the technological side of things, without building what you just said, without considering all these different aspects. But from your experience and practice, what do you think the companies struggle the most?
I think companies really struggle with not so much getting started. You see a lot of companies that they'll create a pilot, or they'll create a specific type of integration, and they might even do a pretty good job at that. I think the real struggle comes in is when they try to scale those digital initiatives and try to scale them out across their supply chain ecosystem. And that's one of the things when we talk to our customers, they'll say, oh, I onboarded, these first 2 supply chain partners, these first 3, and it took me, 18 months or some big number like that. And they really struggled to get beyond that. And when we kind of peel back the onion to understand, well, why is this so challenging for them? And it really boils down to when you start to scale out and start to look across and start to encounter, if you will, at that deep level, all of your different supply chain partners, you start to see your data is not as consistent as you think it is, because you work with many supply chain partners, CMOs. Those CMOs work with many different pharma companies, and the data can be inconsistent. There's a core maybe that's the same, and then there's lots of variation. And so the different partners will operate with different systems, different formats, different definitions of the data sometimes, and they're certainly at different levels of digital maturity, some very sophisticated and some very low tech. And as a result, the companies spend a lot of time trying to reconcile and validate the information instead of acting on it. The next is the integration complexity. Because many companies are operating across multiple enterprise systems, some have legacy platforms, sometimes there's point solutions in place, manual workflows for certain steps and certain kinds of data. So building and maintaining that integration across that landscape can be really difficult to try to scale out without a clear architecture and standardization strategy that kind of takes into account this is the way the world is going to be. So how do I deal with it? The partner onboarding is highly related because the external manufacturing networks can, in some cases can include many dozens. In other cases, low hundreds of partners with varying degrees of technical capabilities. And integrating those partners efficiently in a repeatable way is often much more complex than organizations initially expect. And the resources are limited, not only to create or build that first integration with your supply chain partner, but also really realistically thinking ahead to say, well, what is it going to mean to maintain all of this over time? And because it's maintaining the systems, the integrations, the business process, and the company, the organization, and the supply chain partners may evolve over time. And then what does that mean for maintaining, right? And keeping things integrated and in sync. And then lastly, that governance and ownership again. So the digital readiness really requires clear accountability for the data standards, the process ownership, partner management, and this cross-functional decision-making. And so without strong governance in the organization, they often end up with initiatives that they themselves never fully scale to the full partner ecosystem, and they're just kind of more isolated targets that they end up being able to hit. So it's a number of challenges that bubble up, I think, to contribute to that scale piece that is, I think, at the center at the end of the day.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's actually a very interesting topic. So we're going to move in a little bit to scalability in a second, because that's super interesting. And the foundation that you actually put now for this discussion around all the different aspects on when or where the companies are actually struggling is going to be very important. Before we move to the next topic, so we're going to move on with our conversation. Let's validate what we just said with the second poll. You're going to see it in your screens in a second. So Lucy just mentioned the typical challenges or struggles that many companies face. What about yourselves in the audience here today? What is the biggest barrier to building a digital foundation in your organization? Is it the inconsistent data, or maybe partner onboarding, integration complexity, limited internal resources, or governance and ownership? I understand that it can be 2 or 3 of those, but if you were to choose one that is the biggest barrier, that would be fantastic. So I see that the responses are showing up. For the moment, the biggest one, Lucy, is the integration complexity. This is the number one, but it is tailed by limited internal resources. So these two, I'm not actually surprised, to be honest, talking with all different types of organization. I can understand that, especially around the limited internal resources for the beginning, and then what you said, the proper setup, governance model, and all this. But yeah, integration complexity. And anything to add, Lucy? Do you find it, inferred kind of, or how do
Yeah,
you
I
feel?
mean, the integration complexity, it's not a surprise because every supply chain partner, they all have different systems. Some of them have customizations. Some of them are, very unique, or some of them are a little bit lower tech. And so when you're trying to integrate them all, it is really hard if you don't figure out how do you normalize, right? How do you create a normalization? And I think the inconsistent data, I see that it's low, and that one is interesting to me because we've seen a fair amount on the inconsistent data, but I almost wonder if because the integration complexity is high and the onboarding, as we saw earlier, is not all the way there yet, right? All the partners are not there, and it's still somewhat limited from what we saw from the first poll, is that people have maybe not discovered how inconsistent the data can be out there because they haven't gotten that far in their implementations.
Right. Yeah. And to be honest, I'm a little bit surprised to see that there was nobody chose partner onboarding or governance and ownership, which is, interesting. It tells something as well.
Yeah.
But yeah. Okay. So thank you very much, everyone, for voting here. Next question would be, Lucy. Do you have, with all your experience, I'm sure you can give us many examples, but maybe you could share with us a use case on what happened and how it played out.
Yeah, this is a favorite project of mine. It was one that I actually spent a fair amount of time on and got to spend a lot of time with the customers and with some of their CMOs. So we have in this real world example, it's a global biopharma company. They're with more than 10 billion in annual revenue, and they have over somewhere between 70 and 80 contract manufacturing partners. Those CMOs represented about 30% of the company's annual sales revenue. So when you think about that, the external manufacturing performance had a really important and direct impact on the service levels, the supply continuity, the inventory, working capital for the company. And the company had some challenges. They were carrying nearly 800 million US dollars in finished goods inventory and safety stock because the CMO performance was unpredictable. And so they were increasing their safety stock. And their on-time delivery from their CMOs was below 60% when they started. And that directly impacted their customer OTIF performance in the downstream supply chain. So when they started, or before they started, their information exchanges were really manual. They were relying on, what we talked about earlier, spreadsheet, inventory reports, and status exchange. Purchase orders were exchanged via email with PDF attachments often. They had that strong reliance on email for a significant amount of their information exchange, and that also translated into a lot of manual rekeying of data into their enterprise systems. And it was really challenging to keep the information and the status up to date and accurate. Like the inventory reports of the inventory at the CMO, they would get it once every 3 to 4 weeks, but then it would be outdated very quickly. And it was really challenging to really have that line of sight. And so the teams were spending more than 100 hours per week manually coordinating activities across the different regions because this was a global setup. Many CMOs were initially hesitant when they started talking about, hey, we want to move into digitalizing our processes. At first, some of their CMOs were a bit hesitant to move away from the traditional ways of working that they were used to. And it took a little bit of convincing to get them to think digital, but they did. And so the company implemented, of course, obviously it was TraceLink to establish that collaborative information exchange environment with the CMOs. And through the direct integration with enterprise systems and the manufacturing systems, they were able to digitally exchange. They went pretty deep and pretty wide. Their forecasts their purchase orders and confirmations, the inventory balances, batch documentation and batch master, and delivery notices with their partners. So they actually covered a pretty wide array. They've even gotten since then much more advanced, but they covered a pretty wide array, and the outcomes were really significant. Their CMO on-time delivery fairly quickly jumped up by 10% and improved, and that started right away. They started seeing their customer OTIF performance improving, and they were reducing failure supply risks that they were encountering. They had more predictable inbound supply from the CMOs, which enabled them to start reducing that safety stock, and they kind of reduced it down initially by 3% in a fairly short order period of time. In addition, the digital integration reduced all of that sort of manual labor-intensive activity by roughly about 50%, allowing the teams now to shift their time away from this administrative coordination that they were doing and this sort of a manual type work that they were doing, and the firefighting that came along with it, and focus more on the strategic efforts that they were there to do, frankly. They were now receiving near real-time data. Like those inventory balance reports were now coming literally every single day, not once every few weeks in an Excel spreadsheet in an email. So every single day, and all the data was coming as it was being generated. And so the execution became much more coordinated and the decision-making much quicker and much more accurate. It was interesting. This started off as external manufacturing team went in to go do this and embark on this transformation. But they did include and they thought about some of the other stakeholders in their organization and in the different sort of cross-functional business units. And then as they implemented for a period of time, they started to capture some of the broader impacts where this digital information was being used and how it was benefiting their broader organization, not just that team in external manufacturing. And what they found was the CMO production planning and customer service, the global planning and global customer service, and logistics teams, even the finance team, they were all seeing benefits because they were leveraging the forecast plan and responses, the PO and the confirmations, those inventory balances, and the batch information and the delivery postings. And across those different organizations, they were leveraging it in different ways because they were getting it into in their case, their SAP system. And it was being leveraged by the different stakeholders in different ways, and it was making a positive impact across the organization. And so this demonstrates that this digital readiness, it's not, an abstract concept. It's delivering very tangible operational value by integrating those CMOs, digitalizing those critical data and transactions, improving that visibility, enabling that proactive decision-making, reducing the manual effort, and really importantly, I think, establishing that partner foundation that then enabled this company to really start scaling. And that was the key, because then they started to multiply on the benefits that they were achieving. And in one other note that I'll make, this happened to be a fairly large size company. Mm-hmm. We've also worked with some really small companies, and they see similar results. They see similar challenges, and they see similar results when they move forward. So it really doesn't matter, it doesn't appear to matter from what we've seen, how big or how small you might be. Even the really big companies face those really same challenges and have those really same manual operations that the small companies do. I don't think size is a factor here when it comes to some of those challenges.
I actually wanted to ask you this question, so thank you for answering before it was asked. Because I was a little bit worried, because sometimes we talk about the scale, we talk about this billion-dollar companies, changing things, making things smarter, introducing AI solutions, and you've worked with all the sizes of companies. I'm glad you've seen that and you've experienced that it's actually relevant for any type of company, any type of organization. So we're talking about SMB market and enterprise, all types of and sizes of companies. That's really great. And it sounds almost like moving from the manual Excel email type of chasing of the data, follow-ups and hours of doing so. Even in a small company, there's somebody who needs to do that, right? So you can actually think about this as your network, and in network-driven type of orchestration where you can really make things smarter and get the data flowing, so you don't have to chase it. And one thing that I've noticed, which I really wanted to ask you about, was we've been working with TraceLink on sorry, or implementations for the Mint solution so far. And what I've seen is that, as you mentioned, the first approach could be really, because companies, I think they understand that, hey, we live in the 21st century. We don't need to be doing these things this way. Let's now go back to the pigeons, to send the messages. Let's try and see how we can use these AI agents. And there's this pilot happening, but then I think companies struggle a little bit to scale it. And when I say scale it, I just don't want to kind of confuse things here. So even if it's a small organization, there's a number of transactions that they would like to automate, or maybe they've got 1, 2, 3 partners. There's this type of data that should, different types of data that they could be dealing with in a very different way, but they still struggle with it. They still struggle with scalability, whether big or small. And the bigger of a challenge, I guess. But what do you think? Why is that? Why do companies struggle with the scalability here?
Yeah, I think that the struggles there are actually tied to the challenges that we discussed earlier and that we reviewed in the poll around the data consistency and integration complexity and partner onboarding and resource constraints and so on. I think it's really tied to a lot of that because, most companies can successfully run a pilot, or they can even go live with a specific or small number of controlled integrations with their supply chain partners. But it's really when they try to start going after often when they're selecting that first, they're often selecting, we've got some symbiotic requirements and we're both ready to go and we're both at even a maturity level where we're going to try doing this together. We're similar, right? And they start to go do that. But then, when you're bringing on number 2, number 5, number 10, number 20, number 30, number 54, and you start continuing to increase across the supply chain, across your global partners that you're trying to onboard, that's when you start to see now more of the challenges, more of the differences that might exist. That environment is now less controlled because you're delving into the wild and into the real world. And I think when you start to see all of those diverse external partners and some of the challenges that they have, related to what we talked about earlier, that is what now creates those struggles in really trying to go end to end, right? And not just the select few. So as you start to move beyond those handful of partners, your complexity, increases really system. Because that's when, really significantly, that's when you start to see all the differences that are there in terms of the maturity of the partners and the data quality. They're not all in that symmetrical to you like when you were first getting started. And these things start to become the barriers to scale. So it's not so much the pilot itself. It's really whether or not, when you embarked on your journey, asking yourself, the way I'm embarking on this journey to start this first pilot or these first few supply chain partners that I'm onboarding, it's asking yourself, do I have the operational model in place, in how I'm going to approach this, how I'm going to ensure consistency and continuity, how I'm going to manage the diversity of the partner integrations, how we're going to manage and approach the governance. And have I thought that aspect, that whole operational model around that, have I thought that through such that I can do it in a very scalable and repeatable way? And I think that's why, even though your pilot might be successful, and then things start to get hard after that, I think it's because that digital readiness sometimes is being thought of more like a technology project when it really needs to be thought of as a core enterprise capability that then you model and then you continue to move forward. And I think people don't always think about it as that enterprise capability.
Yeah, and we're seeing that as well, because we've been talking about the Opus platform, right? About your tools and the platform that for the supply chain for a while now. And I think there's a point where companies now started asking. I think at the beginning it was more, the questions were more around the technology. Okay, so what is it going to do to me, right? How, if I put it in here, is that going to resolve all my issues and problems, etc.? Now the questions are like, how do I structure? Where do I what resources I can use? When I use the resources, what is the best way? Because I might have, as you mentioned, some partners, maybe they're not that digital, let's call it, in a way, because there's a lot done with email and maybe other manual tools. Some of them, they're super digital and they have tools, they have good strategy for the digitalization and so on and so forth. So this would be a challenge. I can see it as a real challenge. But the companies quite often, when we talk about Mint or other solutions, they ask, okay, how do we put structure in there? Because having one, then we need to having one partner onboarded with a number of transactions. It's a one thing, but then how do we scale? And then once we scale, what's next? How can we look at other transactions? Can we look at other areas? Maybe we look at invoicing, but what about the serialized shipments? What about this? What about that? And what I'm trying to say here is that myself, I can see within the last maybe year and a half, the questions and the focus of the companies is changing. But I know that also you in TraceLink, you spend years architecting the foundations to make this easier. Maybe not easy. Well, I think easy actually, because at the end of the day, obviously you need a resource to do implementation, to put the procedure in place, to make sure that there's a structure, there's a framework. But then you put quite a few foundation there. Would you be able to say something more about that? What foundations you put in there?
Yeah.
How does it work now?
Sure, and thank you for that. I mean, I think the fundamental approach is when we embarked on this, and honestly, it even dated back to our unique approach that we had in track and trace and compliance, because we had to onboard and integrate and help our customers across full supply chain partner ecosystems, pharma companies and CMOs and logistics partners and downstream supply chain. And it was all the same kind of complexities that we see here in the rest of our supply chain information, supply chain digitalization. And I think the key was how we approached it, because for us, it was not a technology project. We did treat it as an enterprise capability. And I say we take that further. We treated it as a multi-enterprise capability. And how do we enable this as a multi-enterprise capability that our customers can benefit from? And so, and how do you make it easy? And honestly, we got challenged when we started on this by, I remember it was the CIO of a major contract manufacturing company. And he came to us and he said, you guys have to figure out how to be better than point to point. This isn't just B2B exchange. You guys have to figure out how you're going to make this easy and how you're going to let all of us in the supply chain be the way we need to be, our data formats, the structures, because we're all going to have different systems. We're all going to have different enterprise systems. And you got to let us be. You can't tell us go change just because, change our systems and change everything about our internals, because we need to integrate with our supply chain partners. So you guys need to go figure that out. And then when you figure that out, you come back and talk to me again. And we did. We took it was in the very, very early days. And we took it to heart, and he and his company ended up being a great collaboration partner. We learned so much, honestly, that created the foundations of where we're at today. So, some of this, like you said, we spent years kind of working through this and figuring out how do we make this easy. And we never lost sight. This many years later, we still think of him and still reference him because he really was the catalyst for us getting to where we are with our thought process. And so first it starts with the supply chain entities, our customers, their supply chain partners, every organization. And in our network, it's not, hey, I'm going to set up my B2B. It's a connection. I integrate and I'm moving data around and transactioning data. We do not at all treat it like that. First, every entity, every company on the network is represented by a true single digital twin of every entity in the supply chain. And the supply chain ecosystem is modeled. And then when they want to integrate together, they link to each other, almost like LinkedIn, right? We link in. It's simple like that. And why is that important? It's important because you need to trust every supply chain partner that you are going to integrate with. If I see a company on that network, I need to know that that company is who they say they are. And I certainly should not see 7 or 8 representations of that company on the network. I need to trust that the entities on the network are who they are. And TraceLink onboards those companies and establishes the connectivity to those companies and then helps onboard and integrate them for the different transactions. But that digital twin, you're going to hear me talk about this probably some more, because that digital twin, it's important from an AI perspective later, because just like as a person, I know who my supply chain partners are, and the people in the organizations know, and they need to understand their supply chain ecosystem. Well, later on, when you're going to use AI, your AI is going to need to understand your supply chain ecosystem, just like the human users do that it's supporting. And so having that true digital twin representation of your supply chain ecosystems is important to enable the digital exchange, but it's also important as a foundational element for your AI capabilities. Layered on top of that is our what we call our business to network integrate once model. And what this does is it enables each company in the supply chain to only have to care about how they want to integrate for each transaction type, what format that they're going to use, and what works best with their enterprise systems, whether they're sending data out to somebody or they're receiving data in for somebody, and whether that data is EDI, X12 in US, Edifact in Europe, or SAP iDoc, or a direct ERP integration like NetSuite or Microsoft Dynamics or S4HANA API, any of those. Or it could be a web UI because there's somebody who is in the midst of changing over their systems, or they're very, very low tech and very small. And so they do need a bit of UI assistance for their capabilities. Or, we see this all the time. I'm able to get my system to automate generate a file, but I can't translate it, but I'm going to email it to you. And so can that email come in and then be leveraged in that same standardized exchange way? So this is basically what that CIO from that contract manufacturer company was challenging with. Let everybody be who they are. Let them come as they are, but still integrate your way to achieve that interoperability, while your supply chain partner can integrate their way to achieve the interoperability. And then the TraceLink platform manages everything in the middle. And we manage the translation from you to me, and me to you, and me to everybody else. We manage that translation through a standard network canonical data model. I'm not going to go into all the techie details on that, but basically it's every transaction type has a single standard network-wide canonical data model that enables the integration and everybody else to be different and to be who they are and transact in the formats and the structures that work best for them, but yet seamlessly integrate and have that common contextualized understanding of the data that you can then leverage. And those are really, I'd say, some of the core tenets that we bring to the table. And part of what makes this so easy is if the supply chain partners are onboarded, the connectivity is established, the integration formats are put in place. And when a company only has to worry about their side of the equation, their format, their systems, their data, and they don't need to worry about every single one of their supply chain partners, their jobs just got a whole lot easier. and then that maintenance, TraceLink maintaining that with the different partners on the network. And so now it becomes a lot more plug and play to integrate. I don't have to worry about when my supply chain partner upgrades their ERP or they're making a change, because they're working on that with TraceLink. TraceLink is helping them test, helping them get upgraded, and then my data is just seamlessly flowing with them, and I don't have to make any changes just because my supply chain partner made a change. The traditional models, you have to worry about all those things, and what, by us taking on this business to network integrate once concept, that's really the basis for how everything has become very, very simplified.
Absolutely. Thank you, Lucy, for this one. And this is what we hear from your customers, to be honest. The network effect, and it's basically that's an amazing approach, and that helps with orchestrating the whole change and with making this supply chain really digital. So that's what we see.
It's so much better to do the work only one time for all of us.
Just one thing that I forgot to mention to everyone, we do have a chat where you can ask questions to Lucy if you have any. So I should have done that at the beginning. Sorry for that. But if you have any questions, please put it in the chat. I will read it, and so Lucy can address them. If not, you can also send us an email after the webinar. Happy to follow up with you at any point of time. So now let's move on to the last topic of today, but a very important one, AI. So where does agentic AI fit in all of this?
Yeah. So, we really shouldn't think about agentic AI as some sort of, standalone technology that will just magically fix all these disconnected processes. AI really does depend on the same foundational capabilities that we've been discussing. It needs accurate and trusted data. It needs the integrated partners. It needs digitalized workflows. It needs strong governance. It needs contextualization of the data. These are really important elements that AI needs to have in place if it's going to be successful. So when you think about the AI journey, it typically happens in stages. Because it can sound overwhelming. How do I get all those things, right? And how long is it going to take me to get all those things? So first, companies need to digitalize and integrate both the data and the cross-company processes. If the information remains fragmented in those spreadsheets and emails and very disconnected systems, there's really very little that an agent is going to be able to reason over in an effective way. Once the digital foundation is in place, then organizations can begin to leverage agents for repeatable, repetitive, well-defined operational work. So things like monitoring information, escalating issues, finding exceptions, supporting decisions, recommending actions, helping to orchestrate business processes, but doing so within defined controls. And this is where the agentic AI starts to become really powerful because it allows teams to move away from that manual chasing of updates and reconciling all that information to really focusing on the exceptions, their root causes, decisions that are strategic to be made, performance of my partners and collaboration with my partners. Agentic AI now becomes this sort of, if you will, orchestration layer that augments the human teams and adds to what they're doing and makes the operating model more intelligent and scalable. And of course, we're in pharma. It's a highly regulated industry. Governance here is absolutely critical and, a non-starter if it's not in place. And so agentic AI has to operate with permissions, with auditability, with decision boundaries, with escalation paths, and with human oversight. And the goal here is not uncontrolled autonomy. The goal is trusted, governed execution where the humans remain accountable, but the AI is helping them. They're, think of them as your digital workforce. My digital agent, that is my employee, that's on my team, that's helping me to improve speed and consistency and productivity. And finally, Implementing and planning of this is essential for successful adoption. So defining the right use cases, the controls, your operating model, your change management path, so that people trust the agents and they know how to effectively work with and alongside the agent technology. That last part I think is really critical, important success factor.
Thank you. I think that's really important as one of the very last kind of topics that we've been talking today is if I understand you correctly, but that's also what we see in the market, is that it's not really I think we mentioned it already maybe twice in the conversation. It's not really the technology transformation. It's a smart orchestration across the data, people, teams, partners, in order to, as you said, to leverage the fact that we do have a network. If we plan everything in the right way with the governance model, with the processes to cover, as we discussed, partners having different stage of digitalization, that brings us where we want to be, to an orchestrated AI type of supply chain. And as you mentioned, it's not replacing the human beings behind it. It's just giving extra tools to improve, augment the operations that they're responsible for. So I think that's it, and that's very, that was very interesting. And I'm afraid that we're running out of time now. I don't see any questions in the chat. So I guess from my perspective, Lucy, I just wanted to make one maybe comment where we've been working with one of the CDMOs using your tool for track and trace, actually. And the last year we met at the Future Link, and there was an interesting discussion because we started talking about, like, okay, so what can be done with AI, what could be, and then a couple of other people joined, and we started talking about, like, okay, so is AI actually removing people? Is it like this magic technology that you put somewhere in and it's gonna do all the trick? No, it's not. And interesting thing was that we had a discussion about improving a couple of, or automating a couple of transactions they had, especially around ordering, invoicing. They wanted to also improve the time the goods spent in the warehouse, because obviously that's cost. And interestingly, they're wrapping up their pilot now, and they're planning the whatever we mentioned around strategy, governances and all this, on how to roll it out and scale. So it's coming, it's here, it's basically here. We just need to think about it not as a maybe future kind of situation, but that let's just sit down and think what is the waste that we have in our procedures, in our operations, and then think, everything you mentioned, across the data, across the digitalizations, the fragmented work, silos, how we work with our partners, the way we communicate with our partners. And then, there's already tools that you've developed already based on years of experience. So I wouldn't think of a better, conclusion here. If you would like to add anything before we finish, please feel free to do so.
Yeah, I just encourage people to, to get started, because that's how you're going to learn. And learning is everything. And it gives you the experience, it gives you the confidence. A natural question that people will ask is, well, before I can get started, I'm interested in AI, and I understand digitalization needed. Does that mean I have to do everything and digitalize all my processes before I can even get started? And the answer is no, you don't. The key to getting started is pick one process where you feel some kind of pain. Pick a few supply chain partners. Start digitalizing just those, whether that's in, your purchase orders or your inventory or, shipment tracking, forecasting, whatever your area is. Pick one area, pick a pain point, pick a few supply chain partners, start digitalizing those. and then you can grow from there. And that serves the basis. It helps you put the patterns in place. It helps you serve the basis, and then you can start leveraging your agentic capability. But you don't have to, if you will, boil the ocean and do everything before you can get started. You really can incrementally move your way there. And I think that is really important because people do need the opportunity to experience and the opportunity to learn, because there is this big change management piece that comes along with it, and then understanding, now what does it mean for me to do this in more areas and have more impact.
Thank you, Lucy. And maybe one last thing from my perspective to everyone. There's companies that actually already did that or are doing it. So if you have any questions, no commitment at all, you can contact us, and we're happy to just explore it more and discuss whether, and how you could do that as well. Yes, Lucy, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure talking to you. Thank you everyone for joining. Please follow up us on TraceLink and Nubino LinkedIn pages. Look for more because there's many things happening and coming. So thank you so much. Have a good day, and you'll receive the materials after the webinar.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you, Jarek. It was great talking with you, and thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.